Okay, everybody, we are here to work on the budget line indifference curves and the demand curve worksheet. So the first question, what is the purpose of the budget line model? There could be a variety of answers here, but you might think of some of the following. You could talk about how it shows us some big ideas, scarcity, choice, opportunity cost. You could talk about how it lets us see what happens when price changes or income changes. Basically, let's try to predict what consumers are going to do. And then finally, most importantly, we can derive a demand curve. So since demand curves just look at, hey, what happens when the price changes? What do consumers do? We can simply start drawing a graph of price versus quantity demanded when consumers choose differently when price changes. Okay, so for this question, you're going to want to make sure you read everything completely before you start. And key pieces of information are that Maya has $100 and almonds are priced at $4 and pretzels are priced at $2. And then something changes, and although her income stays the same, the price of almonds rises to $5. Nothing happens to the price of pretzels. So a good question to ask is, where do you start? And the answer is, it's good to start at the beginning. So where is the beginning? The beginning is to figure out what is the maximum amount of almonds and the maximum amount of pretzels this person can afford. And that's because the budget line simply looks at what is the most you can afford. So let's first, I agree on this statement that the price of almonds times the quantity of almonds equals how much you're going to spend on almonds. Or another way to say it, using the dot instead of the X to denote multiplication, is that the price times the quantity is the cost. And if we want to use up all of our income on almonds, we could consume at a maximum however far $100 goes when almonds are $4 a pop. So 100 across bags of almonds that are $4 each is going to buy you 25. That's our maximum amount of almonds. And if you do the same for pretzels, you get a maximum of 50, but that means no almonds. So let's graph those two extreme points. Paying attention to the instructions, I'm supposed to put quantity of almonds on the vertical, quantity of pretzels on the horizontal axis. And here's your line. And it's always good to write a little note on there to yourself. I've got you suggesting that you write it budget line equals 100, but you can also add what prices are on that budget line. So now we look at a new budget line where nothing else has changed except the price of almonds. So at $100 of income, we can afford fewer almonds because the price rose. So you do the same thing where you divide your income by the price to get the maximum. So now at the maximum, you can only afford 20 almonds. And you've got both budget lines now. So which is the correct spot for Maya to be at on each budget line? Well, we know that she's going to want to make herself happy, which, assuming she likes both goods, she's going to want to spend all her money, like more goods makes her happier. So assume that she wants to spend somewhere on the line. Like she could afford some points below it. Everything below the line is affordable, but it's just not going to make her as happy as points on the line. Likewise, anything beyond the line she cannot afford. So basically, we're missing some information because although we know what she can afford, we don't know which is the best combination of the goods. And so we need to know something about her preferences. And a nice map of preferences that we have in economics is called indifference curves. And it's useful to remember what an indifference curve is right now, so let's do that. So an indifference curve is simply a line of all the different combinations of consumption points that give you the same amount of happiness and satisfaction. For instance, if you're equally happy with 4 pretzels and 8 almonds, or 8 pretzels and 4 almonds, those would be 2 points on one of your indifference curves. But that's probably not going to happen because of this thing called the law of diminishing marginal utility. Stated in a couple of different ways, it means consuming more and more of a good yields less and less additional satisfaction, also known as marginal utility. Another way to say it is if you're eating only pretzels or only almonds, that's pretty unlikely since you would be really kind of quite tired of that one good. And you just probably wouldn't be as happy. As they say, variety is the spice of life. Okay, so let's turn our attention to number 4. Why are indifference curves convex? Hint, think about number 3. Basically, you want to say something like, because the law of diminishing marginal utility basically means that if we concentrate and specialize in consuming more and more of one good, we're going to get tired of it. Its marginal utility drops. And as we get more pretzels, we get tired of them and are willing to give up more and more of those pretzels that we're tired of to get a single bag of almonds. We're like, my kingdom for a bag of almonds. So one way to think about this is when we're out here at like 30 pretzels and only one almond, we're willing to give up a lot of those pretzels to get just the one almond. All right, next question. So what you want to do to figure out where the best choice is for our consumer is to figure out the highest happiness that she can afford. In other words, any point on the budget line that touches the highest possible indifference curve, that's what you want. So these are the graphs that I drew in class. Notice that on indifference curve 1, you have all the different combinations of goods, pretzels and almonds that give you the same amount of satisfaction. Indifference curve 2 is slightly higher satisfaction because you're getting more of both at every combination. So 5 is the highest level of happiness, 1 is the lowest. So we want the highest, right? When we're on the original budget line, the top one, where our budget was 100 and the prices of almonds were 4 and the price of pretzels was 2, we could afford a bunch of different points, but only the point that touches the indifference curve of 4 at the highest level of happiness is the optimal point. And that's how you want to treat every budget line. If you're asked about the optimal point, you just find along the budget line that quantity that gives you the highest level of happiness. So in other words, where the budget line is just tangent to the highest indifference curve. So for instance, for your new budget line, when the price of almonds has risen to 5, you're looking at the lower budget line, right? You can afford less, and the highest point is going to be here. So let's take a look at those quantities, because that's what the next question is going to ask us. So when the price of almonds was 4, we consumed about 13.5. And on the new lower budget line, it looks like about 11. So let's take note of that. When the price of almonds was 4, we demanded 13.5, and when it rose to 5, we demanded just 11. Does that sound suspiciously like a demand curve? So let's bring that information into the next question. What happens to the consumption of almonds when the price rose? Is this in line with the demand curve? Yes, because as price rose, quantity demanded fell. Now we can graph it. So you always want to label your axes, price on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal, and the good in question. And now you just plug in your points and connect the dots. The mistake I made in class, incidentally, was that I took the quantities from pretzels rather than almonds. But clearly the price of almonds is changing and the quantity demanded for almonds is changing. And that is how we get our demand curve for almonds. We've just derived a demand curve. What?